Hello, hello, testing, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. when David comes back, we'll go on live on TikTok. Good? Cool. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're thrilled to get things kicked off today with our live event. My name is Christian Reed, co-founder and CEO of REEKON Tools. I'm extremely excited to be here before you all today for a historic event as we share our future vision for a digital construction light. Broadcasting live from our Boston, USA Research and Development Center, the entire team here is eager to get things started and share what we have been working on for more than a year. We have an exciting schedule ahead and lots to show, so let's dive right in. It seems like just yesterday that REEKON Tools started in the midst of the pandemic, back in January of 2020. Time has certainly flown since then. After launching one of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns in history, we transitioned to selling to many traditional retail channels such as Home Depot, Lowe's, Acme Tools, and Amazon. Tens of thousands of professionals across the globe have found a place for the M1 caliber in their essential toolkits, and we're excited to see the continued adoption and new applications pop up almost on a daily basis. From our inception, REEKON Tools was never about a single product. It was clear from very early on that the need for innovative digital products would be paramount to both our future existence and as a company what we could provide for the industry. While this certainly has been an uphill battle, as construction workers and contractors are some of the hardest to convince people around, we are very proud of the progress we have made and look forward to continuing the fun with even more innovative and disruptive products. When architecting our next generation of products, we took a step back to explore the range of possibilities of the job site and how we could best serve professional tradespeople who depend on their tools every day to get the job done. As part of this exploration, it was important to understand and reflect how various tools had evolved from their current form to today. Essential to any operation done on a job site is measuring. Whether cutting a piece of material, drilling a hole, mounting a frame, or placing an object, they all start with a measurement of some kind. One of the most commonly used and elemental tools on any job site to take reference measurements and place objects is a tape measure. The original tape measure was invented in the late 1800s and hasn't evolved very much since. So while we weren't able to get one of the original tape measures, I think for our friends on YouTube and Instagram, you can see the frame on the bottom is one of the original patents, which was filed in the late 1800s. So one of the earliest tape measures we were able to get our hands on is a Stanley tape measure from roughly the 1920s. So I'm not sure how much of it is showing up in the frame here, but you can see there's quite a bit of the form factor of today on here. There's no spring inside of it. It's all manual pulling in and out, but represented quite the shift from what was before mostly fabric and cloth tape measures to a metal stamped case made in the USA, one of the early 1 million patents. So for reference, we're at about 12 or 13 million now. So very early on, and a lot of the measurements printed in a very crisp, feels like an ink, perhaps engraving of some kind on here, but again, this is almost 100 years old at this point, and quite the evolution and survival of time, and really represented a paramount and as well as a evolution of the tape measure design. So later on, there's continued evolution, some slight changes to it, and it wasn't until 1963 where Stanley again introduced the modern form factor of the tape measure, which most of us have seen and used before with the iconic Power Lock series of tape measures, which was unique in both the form factor of how it was laid out along with the colored blade on it. So again, with much searching and digging, I was able to find one of the original Stanley catalogs from 1964 where you can really see and capture, again, hard to see on the screen, but I think we have a pop-up here on the bottom of the shot of the page along with some of the original tape measures here. And I think one of the most unique things that's maybe not easily visible in the original ones is the direction of how the tape came out, where this is really oriented towards left hand on the belt and extend on it. And I think later on, most tape measure companies agreed that tape measures should really be optimized for right-handed people. So I think that's one change, but you can really see the form factor of the tape measure is really what started to become defined and evolved at this point with the locking mechanism in front of it, an ABS or some kind of polycarbonate injection molded housing on it, along with the tape measure blade, which again to this point had been mostly white, and this was one of the first yellow tape measures, very similar to the ones we see, use, and are familiar with today. You can see the Stanley logo on the bottom here. So again, these series really changed the game for tape measures in 1963 when they were first released, and have continued to slowly but surely be incrementally involved since that point in time. So I'll put these props over here out of the way. So after this evolution in 1963, there is quite a bit more done on the tape measure, and rapid period of innovation in the 1980s. So again, you can see here, this is one of the Craftsman's before for comparison, and later on, many other companies started to get more and more involved with the process as well. So one of these kits that I was able to get my hands on, and I'm sure many people have heard of before, is the Apex company Lufkin. And this is a pretty remarkable kit from the best I can tell from the 1980s, and really highlights a salesperson's kit at the time. So we have a series of tape measure blades up here, again, largely similar. There's a stainless one, some different kind of units on it. You can see we have the different components down here, depending on how well they're showing up, from the housing itself, which is, again, likely some kind of evolution from sheet metal, to the advent of injection molding and likely an ABS blend, as well as the internals of a tape measure. And I think many people take for granted a tape measure but don't actually know what goes on inside of it. So here we can kind of see the internals of the tape measure and a more exploded view of the reel itself. So what most people don't realize as well is that there's a spring the same length as a tape measure inside of it that starts on the outside edge of the reel, and as you unwind it, goes to the center and dictates how much of the tape measure blade can come out of it. So pretty remarkable concept in general. And again, while this kit is from 1982, the large majority of tape measure design and function in general has been much more incremental in nature and hasn't evolved significantly since that point. So again, since the early advent, and really led by Stanley in the 1960s, there's been less and less room for companies to innovate on a traditional analog tape measure, which is the large majority of the market now. So again, many of the marketing claims and focus have been really revolve around buzzwords, whether it's stick out, reach, trying to talk about the blade durability, where a lot of the coatings and processes used now were first pioneered in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with incremental innovation since that point. So I think when we really took a look around, and again, in a second, I'll show you some of the large diversity and number of tape measures that we've touched and played with to really get a sense of it, but the large majority of tape measure design to this point has really been optimization, and you can see by my tray of tape measures here, and this represents just a fraction of the total number that we have, that again, a lot of the innovation here has really been relying on the industrial design of it and the brand name on the side of it. So again, pretty remarkable here, and I think when we looked at some of the next products to make, we really went back to the drawing boards and decided to architect it from the beginning. So again, a selection of the tape measures we have here. Again, these are what I would call a pretty good representation of a contractor grade of tape measure. We have some of the big beefy Kleins that are about 1.5 inches, 32 millimeters wide, very robust. Nice coating on it. Again, some of the Stanley Power Lock, which again has really kept that iconic design and evolved it over time, along with a handful of other ones. But the large part, while these certainly are useful and helpful on a job site, the large majority of them are similar, and you really just have to pick a brand name and allegiance on it. So over the past year, we've really carefully studied these and evaluated them for their strengths and weaknesses, and really tried to get to the core of what makes a great tape measure. Is it the brand name on the side of it? Is it the performance in some edge case conditions? A lot of companies now talk about dropping off a 100-foot building, but again, is that really a practical metric? And I think we really needed to dive through these marketing claims and really evolve of what makes a great tape measure. And I think this is really essential for our process of developing digital products, so they first have to perform their base function well before we can evolve to a more robust functionality in the digital world. So again, our DNA is really built around the digital world. So I think with that said, and really looking at these analog tape measures, it was clear we would really need to start from the beginning in our process of making a better tape measure. So before getting too much further, I think it's important for us to remember that the process of digitization alone doesn't imply innovation or usefulness. There really needs to be a practical element of what ties it together and delivers an order of magnitude benefit to our customers who are professional tradespeople. Otherwise, risk getting really sidelined to a sharper image gadget or something that more aptly belongs on a Christmas gift or a grab bag shelf than it does in a hand of professionals. So I think this is something we really took to heart, and when we evaluating these tape measures, while our design and purpose was a lot different, there's a lot of good elements that we could pull out of these that companies have evolved, refined, and perfected over the course of the past 60 years. So I think this is something we all paid quite a bit of attention to and really brought us to where we are today with the T1 tape measure. So when designing the T1, we were really keen again to deliver these order of magnitude benefits to professionals and then some. Early on in the process, we realized that making a digital tape measure couldn't be successful until first it was a great traditional tape measure. Durability, standout, tip geometry, the blade coating on it, retraction, having an auto lock were all points we really focused on to make sure that we were able to deliver this benefit to professionals and really shine as a digital tape measure to make sure we could deliver on the basics. So after taking care of the basics, it was time to upgrade the device. We started from the bare bones skeleton and built around it. Impact protection, removable batteries, dual screens, lasers, the list goes on, and we really cramped each and every feature we could into the device, and it's kind of remarkable just how much functionality is in this device, where a lot of the initial comments during teasers were speculating that they were different devices, but it is all in one device, all in one form factor, and I think that's quite the testament to the amount of thought, design, and engineering that went into it. So again, a culmination of more than a year's worth of extraordinary effort by the team, technology development, and obsessing over the details. The entire REEKON Tools team is excited and thrilled to announce and unveil, for the first time ever, the T1 Tomahawk digital tape measure. Stream. So hopping right back into it. So the intro video, again, we'll be posting a lot more details on that on our stream later on. So we'll get into more details on that and share the YouTube video link after the presentation. But just to dive into the tape measure itself, I think one of the most remarkable things of it, which I'm sure everyone saw in the live view demonstration, is the ergonomics of it, right? So again, this is a pretty average size contractor 25-foot tape measure here next to the T1. So the size of it is certainly different, and it's necessitated by two things. One, obviously there's a lot more electronics and components going on in it, but I think more importantly is the invitation of your hand and how it grips it, where a lot of our design and iterations, and again for an approximation, we probably made about 50 or 60 form factor prototypes, not electronics, not functionality, just the form factor of it to really get an invitation of how the hand should interact with the device. So you can see it's really optimized for this grip, similar to grabbing a firearm where there's a handle on here, your fingers rest in between it, your pointer finger is here, and your thumb is in the control panel here, which we'll get into more details on a little bit. So the form factor is certainly remarkable and something we paid a lot of attention to, where again, the bulk of the tape measure, the traditional tape measure is in front here, the reel, there's a removable battery that goes in and out on the back of it. And then of course the screens themselves, which we had to make sure were not covered by the hand and in a practical location that is both easy to view and of course protected when inevitably it's dropped 100,000 times on a job site. So the form factor is certainly something we paid quite a bit of attention to, and we're very keen on making sure that we nail down correctly before evolving on, as there are some crude examples of laser rangefinders and some, I'll call them digital tape measures in quotation marks because they don't really function to job site conditions, but your hand immediately covers both screens on them. They're not ergonomic. So I think one of the first thing to consider here is the ergonomics of the tape measure and the difference in form factor of it. So I think the second invitation, I'm putting in the removable battery now, get it powered up. The second, after describing the invitation of the hand on it, is really make sure the screens are in the right location. So I think one of the challenges with the screens, which I'll try to show the first of the two screens now, the live view screen on top here. Can we see this okay, guys? Looks good. So the first of the two screens on top here is a live view screen. So again, one of the tricks with the form factor is making sure both that it's accessible with your full grip around it. Again, works with a glove, works with whatever, as well as making sure it works in the variety of configurations that you hold a tape measure in on a regular basis. Whether you're left-handed, right-handed, we wanted to make sure the screen is visible. So the live view screen on top here, which we'll dive into a little bit more details later on in the presentation, is really focused on showing what's currently displayed on the tape measure. So this is an OLED display, very visible in sunlight, high contrast behind it, very common in the TV industry as a term, and is displaying what's how much of the tape measure is extended on it. So again, it'll just display that. The units are fully selectable on here, which we'll showcase a little bit later in the presentation, as well as you have a few functionality icons at the top of it, which are a little bit hard to see now, but we'll dive into more detail on in a second here. So screen number one on top, this is the live view showing what's on the tape measure. Screen number two, which is also kind of the surprise, is really again in the spirit of how do we eliminate an analog process from measuring and turn it into a digital process. And obviously one of the most common things you do with a tape measure is take notes, write it down in your Post-it note, or write it somewhere where it could be remembered later. So I think very early on in the process, when thinking about a digital tape measure, of course, our thoughts go to how to also add additional functionality that just isn't possible on a normal tape measure. And I think the e-paper screen is both high visibility. If you've ever held or used an Amazon Kindle before, it's very similar technology to that, and displays archived measurements on it and just keeps building up a list further and further as you record them. So to give a quick demonstration on that, I'm just going to shift units here. So 13.5 inches on the live view screen. If I click the capture button here, which again in normal grip conditions, I'm trying to hold it so we can see it nicely for the camera, is very easy to select with your thumb, but clicking that once, and you can see the measurement populate on the screen here where the black arrow, boxes. So again, depending on where we want to put the measurement, whether we want to put it as a fresh measurement or overwrite another measurement, we just select the black box here, which can be moved around with this toggle here. Click the plus button and our measurement appears on it. So this is a very useful feature. Again, being a large screen, we have several layers of protection from the overmolded thermoplastic urethane on top of it, a metal cage which also doubles as a nice belt clip on it, as well as a screen protector on the top of it. Really make sure that this is both a functional screen and something that's protected and works in job site conditions. So that was something we take a lot of pride in. I think that's certainly one of the more useful functionalities of this. It also syncs with our measurement application, which we'll get into in a little bit as well, and really ensures that I'm not spending any time writing down measurements. I'm clicking a button and moving on to bigger and better things on the job site. So that's certainly a cool feature. Moving on from there, let's see, still visible from there. Can you put up one of the images just to make sure I'm not blocking it? Cool, all right, I'll go back up here and make sure it's visible. So one of the other interesting points about digital tape measure in general, and something to remember for digital tape measure in general, is that unlike an analog tape measure, if I was marking 12 inches on it, would I go to exactly 12 inches? No, I'd extend it to 24 inches, and I'd have lots of room for my hand to make a mark at the 12-inch mark. With a digital tape measure, as it relies on some reference surface to tell the OLED display where it's measuring from, one of the challenges became, how are you able to make a nice measurement and not have your hand blocked by the body of the tape measure? So one of the other very unique features which we developed and discovered later on of all the ancillary features and functionality it had is the laser extension line. So do my best to show it on the camera here. How's that looking, guys? Can we see it okay? So a laser extension line is a line laser that shoots straight down from the T1 and allows you very easily to make marks that are about 3 inches or what is that in metric? 7.5 centimeters on either side of it to make a mark on it and not get obstructed by the way of the body. And I think one of the effects we found out afterwards is that it's also very helpful for alignment, where if you have a hole or trying to measure a round object for reference on it, it's very easy to see when it's at the apex of the pipe than it is to, even with a traditional tape measure, try to rely on a line on it. So the line laser is a very unique feature, very helpful, very easy to see on it, or also see for drop-off capability. As soon as it drops off, you know you're right on the edge of it versus have to rely on a line that's in between two 16th inch measurements or between a millimeter measurement and metric. So the laser's a pretty cool functionality, and again, what started as something to help with marking and making lines on it really evolved into something that could be very useful for capturing measurements as well. So again, this line shoots straight down. It's about 1 millimeter thick, so a very fine line. And again, if you ever need to adjust it or you have a preference of measuring from the front of it, the center, or the back of it, the laser is fully adjustable front and back and angled slightly. So again, if you ever need to adjust it based on your preferences or should you drop it, it's fully adjustable by the user and doesn't need to be sent back to the factory to be recalibrated or used. So that's a pretty exciting feature, and I think certainly one of the defining elements of the T1 Tomahawk is having that laser functionality and really making the process of marking and picking up measurements very easy. So again, for the front measurement, we have the laser for picking up a surface as well as the front surface. So these are all perfectly in line for one another for, again, picking it up virtually with the laser, or if I was measuring this piece of wood, all I would need to do is come into the front of it and very quickly tell that it's 14 3/16 inches wide on it. So one of the other more frustrating features of a tape measure is measuring inside edges. So one of the most frustrating things from a cabinet maker or someone who's working on interior surfaces a lot is how to pick up a measurement from the inside. And again, a crude way to do that certainly is by using a set of bending the tape measure. You can use a credit card and slide it over and use that as like the reference surface on the edge. But one of the really remarkable things about digital is that we can do this all digitally. So as you can see right now, it's set to take a measurement from this front surface to the outside edge. On the screen here, we have a button where we can select between between the front measurement surface and the rear measurement surface. So as you may have seen before, the rear measurement surface is perfectly flat. So it can both hold the tape measure up and is easy to pick up any surface in the back of it. So in order to switch that mode, I'm going to hold down this button. And now you can see, in addition to the 4.5 inches or so that I have on the front of it, I'm taking into the consideration the width of the tape measure body, which is about 6 inches and change on it. And now with that in mind, I can take a very easy measurement between these two surfaces, which I think you can see most of in the video. But it allows us to now measure in between the two surfaces and not have to worry about the traditional way of bending the tape measure to fit on the inside of it. Roughly estimated, I can get a perfectly precision measurement. Once I'm there, I click the button, and again, I have it on my list now that I'm looking at and have populated here to reference later on down the road. So I think that's a pretty remarkable feature in its own right, and certainly beneficial to all the people who are working on interior applications where corners, inside edges, windows, and cabinets are a common occurrence on a regular basis. So that's certainly a nice feature, and one we're very fortunate to have with the digital ecosystem. Another cool one, which we tease a little bit on social media, is the ability to make a mark one-handed. So a lot of times with measurements, it's very difficult to both hold a tape measure and make a mark with a second hand, especially if you're on a ladder or some other surface where it's either not safe to do or extremely difficult. So one of the pretty cool and nifty add-on features we made for the T1 is the ability to make marks on it with an integrated pencil, pen, marker holder on it. So you can see in the photo below, we have a couple more of the applications of various marking instruments. For this one in particular, I'm going to use a pencil for simplicity purposes. So again, on the side edge of the T1 itself, which might be a little hard to see in the video, we have a V groove on either side of it. So again, the pencil can be mounted to either side of it, and the V groove is also aligned with our precision front reference surface on it. So again, assuming your pencil is sharpened correctly and has a centered point on it, it's very easy to make one-handed marks with it. So again, instead of the process of now taking out your tape measure, taking a secondary marking and putting the mark on it, you can now very simply extend to your desired distance, make a mark, oops, slipped a little bit. Do that one again, make a mark on it and move on from it. So now with one hand, I've both gotten the measurement I've wanted and made a mark on the piece of paper with it. So I think that's a very useful feature, one that we found ourselves using quite a bit in testing, and just a nice add-on feature to it, that it's a pretty simple clip on the side of it. A thumb screw is what actuates it, making sure this is somewhat visible in it, so you can see it's a pretty simple metal clip. It's adjustable, it's on a flexure, so just whatever size and diameter you want. The V groove will make sure it's centered. You can put it in, and then you have one-handed marking as well as measuring on it. So certainly a nifty feature, helpful on the walls. In a demo video, we use it on sheetrock walls for marking out studs. So certainly a very helpful feature, and certainly I think one of my favorite features of the entire T1 itself. Next up, we have incremental measuring. So one of the, again, math problems that's required, and back to the analog process that perhaps is the most common one, is marking out studs, right? Every 16 inches on center, 16, 32, 48, 64, et cetera. On the T1, we can do that in a very simple process. So another feature I guess I'll highlight now is the ability to flip the screen. So again, for our left-handed users, or when it's nice to go, I can flip the screen over so that it faces down, facing closest to you. Again, I'm doing this all backwards, but I'm sure everyone can imagine along with me here as we continue through the demo process. So being able to flip the screen really allows you to look at versatile angles and demonstrate my next concept, which is incremental measuring. So sometimes when I'm measuring a wall, instead of having to do that math in my head, which again, 16, 32, 48, 64 is pretty straightforward and simple for, and probably one of the most common incremental ones, but obviously as you start adding fractional digits, it can get a little bit more complicated. So one of the really cool features of the T1 is being able to take incremental measurements. And by that I mean going to a measurement, say it's 7 inches, gonna have to flip it around here so I can read it. Okay, hitting the incremental button and going to 0. So now I'm measuring from that 7 inches, I can measure an additional 7 inches on it without having to do the math in my head. So I can keep on going with that. Another click will bring us back to the absolute measurement. Another click will take us back to 0, and we can continue on with it. So this is very helpful when you're doing patterns or series of things, being able to do the additional math on the T1 itself without having to worry about any overhead or math problems, and especially the apprentice getting too wild with marking things out and messing up the cuts by trying to do math in their head. So certainly a pretty useful one, and a unique benefit of a digital tape measure. A lot of people, especially in the comments, have asked us about the availability of a metric or English version of it. So in addition to selling replaceable blades on here, one of the most, as anyone who's owned a tape measure knows, one of the first things to go on a tape measure is a blade, whether it's the coating chipping off, someone stepping on it, cracking. So knowing that we have a digital tape measure where most of the cost is in the body itself, all the blades are both fully replaceable should you damage them, as well as fully swappable should you want a metric blade or a split blade between them. So this is very convenient, of course, for our friends abroad who use the perhaps better metric system, as well as easy way, if you damage them, to simply replace a blade on it and not have to worry about getting entirely new tape measure bodies. So again, while this exists on the analog form of the tape measure itself, as well as, again, just to build up the trust in the device that it's accurate and that you're in the approximate range of it, we can also display the measurements digitally as well. So is this good? Do I have a reflection on it? Cool. So you can see the measurements here. I can very quickly toggle between, you have to excuse me, I look over inches decimal mode. So again, this has resolution of up to 0.01 inches. We also have fractional of 16th and 32nd mode if you prefer that, or you can get even crazier with inches decimal mode. Feet inches fractional, which again is another useful unit for longer distances, decking, outside equipment. In 32nd mode, centimeters, millimeters, meters, and then back to inches fractional again. So again, these are all completely toggled between by clicking the units button here. So again, this is going to toggle not only the live view screen, but also update the e-ink screen as well. So if you take all your measurements in inches and decide later that you want to convert them to feet, the e-ink screen will also update as well to reflect whatever's on the live view screen and give you a quick conversion of that. So certainly helpful based on what you're using them for, and if it's more helpful to measure one and the other and then move it over later to another set of units and measurements. And then finally, to wrap up here, I think we covered most of the features on it, and again, we'll be posting ample content over the next couple of weeks to really demo and showcase some of these features on it. Is back to the ergonomics of it, of carrying it around. So again, we have a giant metal belt clip on the side of it, which is really designed not to fray your pants and connect with it. So this is a great loop. We have plenty of room in the back here for different belts or utilities, or should you prefer, we also have a pouch for it to go in. So for those of you that prefer to have a pouch on your toolkit, it goes in the pouch. Very easy to come out and easy to use. Has an auto shut-off function on it, so very functional, very easy to use, and pretty ergonomically designed for carrying on your tool belts, popping it out when needed, putting it away when not, and moving on with it. So we're very keen to make sure, obviously, it's accessible and has many different options for how it's mounted, how it's carried around, and how it's used in regular use. So yeah. T1 Tomahawk. So again, I'll leave it here as we share some closing remarks with it. So the final piece of the T1 Tomahawk is the app functionality, which we'll be describing in much more detail in a later event. But I think one of the key points of the Tomahawk in really creating a unified ecosystem with both the M1 caliber and the Tomahawk is how they all collaborate with one another. So one of the things we started to work on and we'll be launching with the T1 Tomahawk is an application called ROC. And ROC will be a digital link between all measurement devices on a job site, allow you to make cut lists, generate the amount of material you need, apply the measurements to layouts, and really connect these devices together and elevate it from just individual devices that display digital data, but a way for someone to be up on a roof taking measurements and someone to be down on the saw with the M1 caliber making cuts on it. So I think the ROC, in itself deserves its own event, which we'll certainly talk more about at a future date, but it's important to highlight that the functionality of the T1 is not only limited to the device itself, but also the data it can transmit via Bluetooth to the application of cut lists, a duplication of here, say what room they're assigned to, what type of material they should be cut with, and really enhance both the functionality of the T1 and really increase the collaboration amongst the devices on it. So I think that's a pretty remarkable and exciting pathway, which we'll be continuing to share more details on in the coming weeks and really unify the REEKON measurement tool ecosystem into something that can connect the entire job site and really enable things that simply weren't possible before, where you're relying on a post-it note, a text message, a photo of something to transmit data around and have it in a very centralized, robust place on it. So I think that's all very exciting, and we look forward to continuing to demo that and share additional details in the coming weeks on that. So to wrap up here, I think before we go too much further, I think a special thanks is really owed to our initial pre-order backers back in June of 2020, where we started the M1 caliber really as a side project and really evolved and grew as we realized more and more so that the industry and the space as a whole was really absent and devoid of any kind of measurement equipment or upgraded digital capabilities of any kind. And it was really through that belief and support that we're really able to evolve to where we are now and continue to expand our ecosystem to additional products. So we certainly want to extend our heartfelt thank you to you, and it certainly wouldn't be possible with you. Wrapping up here with some more logistical details. So again, today we wanted to unveil the T1. We have an action-packed calendar between demonstrations, live showings, reviewers, everyone getting their hands on the T1, culminating in our March 22nd launch event. So the T1 will be available for pre-order starting March 22nd with an MSRP of $199, but of course, being a pre-order, we're going to have some pretty lucrative discounts for the time being in both the English and metric versions of it. We'll be shipping internationally, and we look forward to seeing everyone then as we share the full specification, product sheet, and really launch the T1 into the world on it. So very exciting opportunity. Be sure to follow us on social media as we have quite a bit of content and other applications to share. And I think one of the most exciting parts about the T1 is that we've only been able to show a fraction of the possible applications for it. As you can see with the laser feature, the rear measuring surfaces, incremental measuring, there's an endless stream of possibilities that we can show with this, and we're beyond excited to both be launching into the world, introducing this next generation of measurement technology, and really seeing what you, our professional customers, use it for. So. With that being said, that concludes kind of the formal walkthrough portion of the live events. Really appreciate you all tuning in, and we'll head to the comments and see if there's anything else that should be demonstrated or you guys would like to see before we wrap up here. Costas or Colton, we have any questions from the audience that we want to run through? So I guess the first question, so yes, the blades are fully replaceable by the user. So again, the blades can come out all the way, and then there's a little hook at the end of them and can be swapped out on it. So this is, we did design this both, everything you're seeing on here that's the blackish blue color is rubber overmold. So it is impact protected along with the front surface here, which again, most of the impact because of how the front is a little bit denser with the tape measure in it to make sure that it's both impact protected and then things and consumables that are easier to break are a little bit more protected and replaceable on it as well. So the blades are fully replaceable by the user. If the spring were to coil up, the reel itself inside is replaceable, and again, it's very accessible and friendly where the laser can be adjusted by removing this front collar here. So we're considerate of that. This itself is an expensive product and it needs to be durable and last a long time in it and have the consumable of any kind of tape measure, which is a blade itself, be fully replaceable on it. So, jumping into a couple of questions we got here. So left and right hand version, we won't be making separate versions for it. Again, we did our best of having hands-on version of it to make sure that even with left-handed, you have the ability to touch off both the left and right side of it, as well as access the auto lock button, which I'm not sure if I alluded to in the beginning of the presentation, but being able to press down on it and go up and down will work to release the auto lock, and again stays in a static position on it, so you don't have to worry about holding it in a specific position, and that it'll just work and stay where it needs to go. So again, it's slightly more optimized, of course, for a right-hand user, but can work equally well with left hand, with the main commands being within reach of your thumb on it. Next question we have is the battery life. So again, the battery is fully replaceable. While we haven't nailed down an exact use case, under our preliminary testing, it can usually last a couple days between charges on it. So again, the battery is fully replaceable. You can swap it out, put a new one in, as well as chargeable on board. So you can see, not sure how clear it is on the bottom, but there's a USB-C port. You plug it in there, and while there's also will be an external charger, there's also a way for it to charge on board should you use it at the end of the day. So under normal use case conditions, 8-10 hours a day using the laser sporadically and the screens, it'll last a couple of days. But again, the batteries are fully swappable and replaceable and should be no problem to keep up and running without a problem on it. Next question we have is waterproof and drop resistant. So again, for the waterproof side, it'll likely have more of a splash rating. It should never be submerged just because the tape, while the majority of the device is sealed, where the tape comes in and out, it certainly has to have some clearances in order for the tape blade to come in and out on it. So I think that's certainly pretty important that we do our best to seal that. It has some dust protection in to make sure we don't have too much dust egressing inside of it. The case is fully removable should any large amount get stuck in there, as well as it will have a splash rating on it for light rain and incidental water exposure. In terms of drop rating, it's at least designed to go from shoulder height and down, normal job site conditions. If you throw it out of a third-story window on asphalt, probably not going to do too well. But we were very keen for both the screen protection itself as well as the size, thickness, and shape geometry of the rubber overmold on it to really make sure that it would be impact protected and be able to avoid drops on it. So I think that was in addition to making as much of the components on it user replaceable as possible. Really, this impact protection is something we spend quite a bit of time on and have some specially formulated resins which we'll be using for production to avoid impact. And again, inevitably, being a tape measure, one of the most commonly used tools, we're expecting the durability and use case of it to be very similar to a drill where it needs to be able to perform drops and get beat up on a regular basis. So as such, we really designed the tape measure to evolve around that body. And looking into any other questions on here, I think that's all. Colton, we have anything from you, Colton? Cool. Cool, so calibration, so one of the proprietary aspects of this and something we're actually not going to go into too much detail on this call, but we'll share in the future is the difficulty of digitizing a measurement. So a lot of the technical engineering that went into this in addition to the ergonomics design and placement of the components is how do you both accurately digitize the data on here and get to an accuracy, which I also don't think we shared, of 0.5 millimeters or 0.02 inches on it. So having accuracy is super important, having precision is even more important, making sure that if I measure this thing 5 times, it's always going to be the exact same measurement 5 times. So one of the unique components of this is one, having redundancy in the way it encodes this and knows where it is at a given time. So we have multiple sensors that are tracking the position of this at a given time. And 2, it is self-calibrating every couple of fractions of an inch or millimeters that it moves, it recalibrates itself. So unlike the M1, which is an open loop system and is dependent on the wheel moving of a object or a piece of material that has no feedback on it, every inch or so that we move out this tape measure blade gives us a series of 10 or so recalibration checks to make sure that we're absolutely corrected for it. So one of the key aspects, and of course, in the premise of being a useful tape measure, is that it always provides an accurate measurement. It can never provide an errant measurement. Other ways, you'll never trust a digital tape measure and therefore won't be useful or beneficial to have on a job site. So I think one of the key components, and honestly probably the biggest technical challenge we had, was just how do you accurately encode the data and always make sure that the value on top of the screen here is exactly what's extended on the tape measure blade. So we did spend quite a bit of attention to that and make sure that it's both self-calibrating on a regular basis and also calibrated at our factory to consider more variables on it. So that's part one of it. Part two of it is the error checking. And I think one of the really key things on here is not only does it work fresh out of the box, but it also works after being beat up for several months or several years on the job site. So we have several layers of error checking on it to both recalibrate itself and make sure I'm at the right measurement on a given basis, as well as to account for edge case conditions. If the blade itself is damaged, if one of the encoders goes bad on it, has several layers of error checking, both to correct itself if it can, or in the worst case scenario, alert the user that something is wrong and we need to fix it before moving on to the next point. So certainly something we paid a lot of attention to and very keen on making sure that was in a very workable, reliable state before announcing it, as obviously that's pretty central to any kind of adoption of a digital tape measure of any kind. Anything else you guys have? Colton or Costas? not going to do that. Oh, this just in from the studio. So let's see, wrapping up with a couple questions here. So warranty, again, this will come with a 1-year limited warranty. We'll share more details on that as we get closer to the campaign, but again, the electronics, the tape measure itself is all very thoroughly tested at the factory, and of course we'll honor any repairs that need to happen within the first year, and then after that as well continue our support, especially for pre-orders that of course we're going to stand behind our product as we have done with the M1. If anything comes up, we're certainly going to honor it and have a special condition for anyone who pre-orders the products on it. Let's see, what else do we have here? How does it work in a typical job site pouch? So again, the tape measure is not too different than a normal size tape measure. So again, while we will be making a custom pouch to it, it can largely fit into many existing pouches that are on many tool belts and other factors there. So again, plenty of room and opportunity for that, and we'll be developing our own holster to work with a variety of storage systems as well. Let's see, what else do we have? The weight. So the weight, again, is about 1.7 pounds. So for reference, a 35-foot tape measure is about 1.8 pounds. A 25-foot tape measure is about 1.2 pounds. So it's about in the middle of it. It's feels a little different than a normal tape measure, where again, the weight distribution for holding a normal tape measure is in the center. It's on one spot, where here you have a nice grip on it. So again, your grip, your fingertips are wrapping around the outside of it. So again, you have a much more comfortable and ergonomic grip on it than you would in a normal tape measure. And between the battery cells in the back and the tape in front, it's a very balanced design between the two of it to be very, again, both ergonomic for holding and have a nice weight distribution and not be too front heavy, too back heavy, just a nice balance with a center of mass near where your middle finger is. So, yeah, and then where manufactured, this will be manufactured in Malaysia like our M1 caliper is. So again, we have a great relationship with our factory. We make several other measuring tools and laser components there. So we're very confident in their capability there, and we'll continue to make great products with them on it. Scrolling through the list here, seeing if there are any other last questions. I think that covered most of the ones here. Anything else pop up, guys? You good? Colton, Costas, good? Oh, getting something in, so we'll see how that pops up. It does have an auto shut off on it, so again, to preserve battery life, it has an adjustable auto shut off, whether that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes to dim the screen and turn back on as soon as you start moving it again. So this is one way to conserve power and really drag out that couple of days to potentially a week or more where the battery's going on. But again, the battery is fully replaceable and swappable. So again, really designed for a job site in the same way that you would replace and charge a drill battery, a saw or whatever. The tape measure is something that should be charged as well and can be charged both on board or externally in a separate charger for the battery in it. But again, it's a very large battery, and in the future it'll also work with subsequent REEKON products. So it's not specific to just the T1. We're working on quite a few other products that will be announced in the coming months and years that will use the same battery architecture, as well as kind of backporting it to our M1 caliber in the future as well. So another common question in comparison to other tape measures is a standout in reach of it. So again, the blade we have in here is 27 millimeters wide, or about 1 inch and 1/8 roughly wide on it. So the standout, and again, I'm making sure I'm remembering the terms here. The standout of it is 9 feet. The reach of it is about 12 feet on it. So very comparable to other tape measures. We do have, and it might be a little easier to see in the photos and the YouTube video that we'll post later, we have one of the most durable nylon coatings on here that actually has slightly raised surfaces to take up the wear on it. So again, we want to be very careful and cognizant that both the top and bottom of the tape measure are well protected and visible over time. And of course, they're in the worst case scenario, if there's absolutely crazy abrasive conditions, the blade is replaceable, but we were very cognizant about the coating we have on here to be one of the thickest and most robust nylon coatings available to the market, and really make sure that everything is well protected underneath it. So again, to reiterate, about 9 feet of stick out on it for reaching across surfaces and making sure it doesn't bend if you're scaling something on a ladder or piece of material that you don't want to go to the other end on. The hook itself has a magnet in it, so again, if I'm attaching to a surface or pulling on something metal, I can clip on there and extend it with the weight of the released auto lock on it to move forward and pull off of a metal stud, pipe, or anything else metallic in the environment. So, yep. You have something else for me, Costas, for bringing over? Getting another telegram in, so we'll see what we got going on here. So the Bladeware is something we are testing pretty heavily, both for one, the functionality of the device itself, and two, again, nobody wants to get a blade and have it wear out after a while. So there's a wide variety of coatings that are on tape measures, ranging from no coating, just paint, labeling, and that's it, to an acrylic-based coating where it's a liquid lacquer that goes over the top of it, to a nylon extruded coating that's put on an extrusion process, melted on the top of it, and it's bonded to the tape itself, to a jacket that goes over it and is shrunk and adhered to it itself on it. So we, from the spectrum of tape measure blades, opted for the most robust one that we were able to find based on our testing, and really provide unparalleled wear resistance on it. That, again, it's both essential for measuring, and while the blade and assembly are fully replaceable, we really want to err on the side of caution and make sure it's as robust as possible. Nobody wants to replace the blade, and again, in the spirit of having maximum uptime, it's certainly something that we spent a lot of time on and will continue to test pretty thoroughly to make sure it meets the job site conditions and is comparable to any other possibility in the market. So I think this is something we've devoted a lot of attention to and developed both a unique geometry and blend of material that's really provided a remarkable result so far, and something we're going to continue to test until the day we ship it to make sure we are delivering a quality tape measure that, again, matches or exceeds the performance of any existing tape measure on the market as well. So something we're very cognizant of. Anything else, guys? Costas, you good? Colton, you good? Great. Well, we really appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. We'll be releasing the YouTube video, which Chris, I don't know, or someone can drop in the chat on it. Otherwise, we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel at about 7 o'clock, so in 9 minutes. You can see the full video from tonight. We're always available to answer any questions at contact@reekon.tools. If you have any questions, feel free to DM us on any social media. But again, really appreciate your time tonight. Thrilled to be announcing and releasing the T1 Tomahawk, and look forward to pre-orders beginning in March.